Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Shayna Powell. I'm a naturopathic doctor in the state of Colorado and owner of West Elks Wellness. This week I have a very special guest, a dear friend and mentor of mine, and the president of the Naturopathic Medicine Institute, who happens to be not only a naturopathic doctor, but a registered pharmacist, and that was her first profession. So we're going to have some interesting conversations about iatrogenicity, which we'll dive into what the definition of that is, and talk some medications because everybody and their brother is on a medication. Dr. Fleetwood, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Shayna. So, as Dr. Powell has mentioned, I'm a registered pharmacist as well as a naturopathic physician, which is a fun story in and of its own. And we don't have enough time for that. Bottom line is, I saw a lot of iatrogenicity as a pharmacist. I didn't have the name for it, and it would take about 20 years for me to find the name for it. But once I understood that iatrogenicity, which means, short definition, harm by medicine, was a real thing that even the medical doctors were talking about, then I found my niche, if you will. And that
Mhm.
is telling the rest of the story about the drugs that people are taking to manage their disease. It doesn't change the outcome, it just lowers a number while other things are going wrong because of the drug that you were put on for the first disease to manage it. So,
Mhm.
niche number one is the rest of the story, iatrogenesis. I love alliteration, so I just call it diseases of the drugs. And my second niche is similar, and that is chronic disease reversal, because I'm sick to death of all this management that doesn't work. So why
Mhm.
don't we just reverse the damn thing and not have to worry about medical management?
Yeah, that is definitely ideal. And so, just so for our listeners, iatrogenicity is harm done by medications and procedures when used correctly. So, this
Correctly.
isn't like the occasional person that gets, the nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting that every medication has as one of its side effects. This
Right.
is the type 2 diabetes you get from taking statin drugs, which are very, very popular. And my understanding is they only extend your life by 3 days. Huh, weird. 3 whole days.
If
If
that.
that.
And not all of the medications even extend life. They can shorten it. For example, since you brought up statins causing type 2 diabetes, which is true, the manufacturer of atorvastatin is under a class action suit for pushing people into type 2 diabetes. But then one of the drugs that's on the market for type 2 diabetes to lower that number actually puts the patient at much higher risk for limb amputation
Oh,
and
one of the side effects
fungal
of type 2
infection.
diabetes, supposedly.
Right. So, we think in terms of macrovascular assistance
Uh-huh.
in type 2 diabetes, meaning the drugs that are selected to manage diabetes are to decrease the risk of heart attack and stroke. That's macrovascular, the big vessels. However, type 2 diabetes really does a number on the microvasculature. This is where people go blind because of the
Mm.
small vessels in the retina. They lose their libido or their ability to have sex because of the microvasculature, the small vessels in the genitalia, or
Mm.
they have kidney damage because of
Right.
the small vessels in the kidneys, or they lose their limbs because of the small vessels in their toes and feet. So now these drugs have been introduced to the market that put them at a much higher risk for blindness,
I
kidney disease, and limb amputation.
So then are those even symptoms of type 2 diabetes? Because when I was in school, that's what I learned. You got to look for end organ damage is what they call that. And those are like end organ is like the small vessels in things like your eyes, for example. We don't want you to go blind as someone that has type 2 diabetes. So we want to make
Right.
sure you get regular eye exams.
And now we got to look at the drugs to see if the drugs are causing what we thought the drugs were designed to mitigate or minimize.
Mm.
And that's the interesting thing that I saw as a pharmacist. The very drugs that are given to manage a particular disease state often cause or exacerbate that same disease state.
So
So,
it's almost worse than I thought. The way I like explain it to patients is we play whack-a-mole with symptoms.
uh-huh,
We reduce your A1C, your hemoglobin A1C, which is a common marker that we use to track type 2 diabetes. It's your red blood cell blood sugar levels over the course of 3 months. It's the average, not the median. So I don't love this test, but that's what we use. And that's the number we manage. And what I'm hearing is that it's not just as simple as like one symptom for another. It's like a cascade of symptoms almost that we get by
absolutely.
managing with medication.
Because, this comes down to what you believe. If you believe that everything is chaos and everything is random and there are a bunch of bugs out there that are trying to kill us, then you're going to want to take all of the antibiotics and antifungals and antivirals and antidepressants and anti-blood pressure and all the antis that conventional medicine has to offer, or the things that help fix your broken biochemistry. You have this mutation and that SNP and this
Right,
mess. Life is scary if that is where you're coming from.
right.
But as a vitalist naturopathic physician, I don't see the world that way. I don't see the human frame that way. I mean, we both took anatomy and physiology and we had to do the cadaver lab. And while it was kind of gross, it was also fascinating.
Very
And
fascinating.
and it shows the brilliance, the wisdom that is built into these physical frames, which, if we actually did the math, our bodies, what we can see, touch, feel, measure, that's maybe 5% of who we actually are, right? Because we've got emotions. We can't take pictures of our emotions. We can take pictures of how the body displays the emotion.
Right,
We have thoughts and dreams and choices that we make. We
mhm,
can't take pictures or touch those.
right,
Some of us believe we have souls and spirits. That's not anything that's measurable. So if we tally up spirit, soul, mind, intellect, will, choices, emotions, and all those 87 that Brene Brown has written about, that's probably 95% of who we are.
hmm,
We don't even understand the 5% that we can measure and touch and feel and photograph, etc. We don't even understand that. But where I'm going with all this is that kind of artistry, that's just phenomenal. So,
right,
listeners, if you think of yourself as maybe your physical body is the holder of you, and here in this plane of existence, your physical body is absolutely brilliant and wise, and it speaks to you, its inhabitant, in the kindest way that will still get your attention. When
mhm,
something is out of balance, then when you have a symptom, ow, I just twisted my ankle, then
right,
that's your body's kindest way of getting your attention because something is out of whack. If you're on a medication to manage a disease, it's not going to stop the progression of the disease. It's just going to make the number look easier and better to a medical doctor. But for me, that's a primary symptom to get underneath and find out why that symptom, why your body is talking to you that way.
right. Right. I had an opportunity to talk with a retired or now retired general surgeon who just happened to do his favorite procedure was the Nissan fundoplication, which
Uh-huh.
is the surgery that's done for hiatal hernias. And my specialty is reflux and all things upper GI. And so I was like, oh, well, you need to tell me a little more. The interesting thing is he's a traditionally trained DO. So I asked
Uh,
him, I was like, well, why do people need to have two and three of these procedures? And he said, because medical doctors don't understand that the body has movement. He's like, my patients didn't have to have that. And then he went on to tell me that you need to look at PPIs. They came
Yes,
out while he was in his first 10 years of practice back in the 80s. Proton pump inhibitors, the number
yes,
one used acid blocking medication to treat acid reflux, omeprazole being one of those drugs. And he said the incidence of Barrett's disease and intestinal metaplasia skyrocketed with the advent of those drugs. Like,
correct.
and so what's really interesting is, well, we have a symptom of heartburn. I'm feeling the regurgitation. I maybe even had my Nissan fundoplication surgery because I had a hiatal hernia. And guess what? Now I have Barrett's and intestinal metaplasia. I actually have a number of patients that this story has happened to. Yeah, but I'm not having any symptoms. Well, but your pathology, your worsening symptom is the fact that you have Barrett's and intestinal metaplasia now.
Yeah.
And my patients are dumbfounded by this, and it's like hard to explain to them the data and the fact that they've been on proton pump inhibitors for 10, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, some of them, and how that's
Right.
contributory. But I don't have symptoms, it must be working. I want to challenge this bit of it must be working because it's an incorrect assumption. What does working mean?
Well, it's stopping the symptom, but
Yeah.
the symptom is the body's brilliant, genius way of communicating through the physical frame, through that which can be
Hmm.
measured.
Right.
The whole way that proton pump inhibitors work is to stop the initial symptom of I'm eating all the wrong foods and my stomach is really it's rebelling. And instead of ditching the foods that are problematic, and this is where the medical doctors just confound me because I'm like, did you not study physiology at all? Because if you're going to stop the production of acid, then that opens up the lower esophageal sphincter, which is the safeguard to keep the acid down in the stomach.
Yep.
But without the presence of that acid, then you're leaving the lower esophageal sphincter wide open so that you're putting food now into the presence of heat and movement, but not sufficient acid to break the food down. So, what's it going to do inside a warm, moist, moving environment? It's going to ferment. And what happens
Yeah.
with fermentation? Bubbles rise to the surface, and your lower
Yeah.
esophageal sphincter is wide open. So, we feel that coming up, and people go, oh my goodness, I need more proton pump inhibitor. No, you need to quit eating the food that caused your body to scream, and you need acid in your gut to provide regular anatomical function,
Yeah.
physiological normalcy. And so,
It's wild. The basic physiology, I would say that's when I was first in practice, that was my textbook I referred to the most so I could explain things to my patients so they understood. And the most common like response I get is, "Why didn't my doctor explain this to me? Like that makes sense. Like that seems right." Right? Like we did the same basic sciences as them, and somehow we're the ones that aren't doing a good job because we're not keeping our patients on these medications. It's I think there's a lot of system issues that we could get into. I try to have compassion for our MD counterparts, but it is very frustrating because I feel like most of what we do as naturopathic doctors is clean up medical doctor messes, if you will, with the pills. They're constantly in the belief that I have heartburn and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm following all the avoid all these foods on the list, but it's still there's other pieces. And as you astutely said a moment ago, 95% of what we experience in the human condition is not actually physical, hugely
right.
emotional and spiritual. And and I wish that I was more versed in Chinese medicine, but the stomach has to do with worry, and the stomach needs certain things and it gets bullied by the liver. And so like it gets complicated in there if you think about it from an energetic perspective, not just what we understand about our hard physiology, but actually understanding then the things that animate our digestive system.
And ours, when I say ours, I'm talking about North America. Our system of medicine is the youngest system of medicine and
Mm.
it's completely devoid of the 95%.
You mean it's not traditional? It grinds my gears when medical
Yeah.
professionals call medical medicine traditional. I'm
No,
sorry. It's been
medical
around for
medicine.
maybe a little over 100 years. That is not traditional. So sorry.
Exactly. In fact, it is. That's part of the NIH's definition of iatrogenesis, because
Mm,
iatrogenesis means harm by medicine, which is, the secondary disease states that a given drug can cause, and that's through its known mechanism of action or a downstream effect of that mechanism of action. It's also
mhm,
the nutritional deficiencies caused by the medication. For example, asthmatics tend to be, as a patient population, low in magnesium. And almost every drug that would be given to an asthmatic, whether it's the inhaler or the leukotriene blocker, or they get a respiratory infection and then the best antibiotics, all waste magnesium. So this
mhm.
puts asthma at a heightened level. Let's stick a pin in that because I really want to come back to those inhalers. But where I was going was structural. There's a structural component to iatrogenesis, and that means that, well, there's systemic, structural, and cultural. So the cultural is taking away our traditional ways of dealing with things
Mhm.
like illness and grief or death.
Right.
Um, Structural is medicalizing life.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a beautiful baby really soon, and chances are you're
Mhm.
not going to be put into a hospital where you're going to
Right.
be offered an episiotomy. Let's just cut your perineum so that
Yep.
it's easier for the doctor to stitch you up in case you would have torn. You're going to be offered medication so that you don't get nauseated because they haven't let you eat all day and you're starving.
Mhm.
You're going to be offered drugs so that you don't feel when it's time to push. You don't
Yeah.
feel pain. I mean, we have medicalized normal delivery of babies. We medicalize our children in that,
Yeah.
give them these shots for diseases that they may never encounter rather than teaching them how to be well and healthy. We just assume everybody's going to be making really poor choices for all of their lives.
Oh,
And then there's the systemic iatrogenesis that is medical policy
yeah.
that gets put into place that actually causes illness, suffering, pain, and death.
Yeah.
This is a big deal, and it didn't happen to this degree until conventional medicine took over the globe. And it is the youngest form of medicine. And if you compare the health statistics of Americans to the rest of the world over the last 40 years, it's gotten worse.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, we have had the same face for our public health for the last 40 years.
Yep.
He came in with a retrovirus gone rogue, and he went out with a coronavirus gone rogue. That's just sort of
Weird.
interesting to me.
Mhm. Yep. We're fatter, sicker, and dumber as a collective whole in the United States, and we consume 66% of the world's manufactured drugs. The world's manufactured drugs, and we are a billion people less than China and India. The
Yeah.
WHO has another statistic I like to repeat, and I will be beating this drum until the day I die. 80%, 88% of the population in the world uses herbal medicine as their primary form of primary care, and we barely use it in the United States. And I have patients that ask me, well, is it safe to use this herb with these medications? Well, yes, I already did my due diligence and checked, because we know dang well that the medical doctors aren't doing their due diligence and checking to make sure the Xanax and the Adderall that my patients are on are not supposed to be taken together. But it's fine, it's okay, no big deal. You need something to go to sleep because you've been high on amphetamines all day. All good. And then they're
They
worried about the
are
marshmallow root I'm prescribing them for their reflux. It's like,
right.
okay,
So the medical doctors aren't doing their due diligence on informed consent, which
definitely
really
not.
matters.
Same.
Um, so I talk about that a lot because
Hmm.
as people come to us for us to clean up what their medical doctors have done to them, and I've got medical doctor friends. So, like you, Shayna, I want to cover them with grace, but they are in a broken system
They
that
are.
is all about fear, honestly. It's fear based medicine, and it's taking away our autonomy, gosh, in so many different ways. There are so many costs to medical management,
I mean,
not
we're
just
so
the,
scared of everything.
well, yeah,
Well, if you're different than what I'm used to, like you're really going to tell me that increasing my berries and eating more protein is going to make a big difference in the outcomes of my type 2 diabetes? I am going to tell you that. Well, why didn't
because
my
it,
medical doctor tell me that? Right, it does. I've seen it. I've seen it make a big difference. And this is why I think it's so important that medical doctors like Casey Means, who made her, who's been making her rounds on various podcasts, because she's not like you and I, Dr. Fleetwood, where we're naturopathic doctors. Like she is a familiar, like I know what medical doctors do. There's a lot of them. Everybody has a medical doctor that they know, right? And she's saying, hey, hold on a minute. I'm doing surgeries on patients, two, three, four times. They're not getting better. We're missing something. And
yeah,
she's questioning it and ended up ultimately leaving her residency because she was not satisfied with her job well done, because her job wasn't well done. Her patients were getting worse and worse and worse. And so I appreciate when a medical doctor actually is just like, has that light bulb moment and is like, we are
right,
maiming our patients, people. We need to do better than this. Has the risk of cardiovascular rates gone down in this country? How about cancer? And how much money have we spent on cancer?
right.
No, they haven't. All of these things have skyrocketed. Autism, July 22, the new statistic was 1 in 32 kids is born with autism now. And that's not better diagnostics, people. That is just
No.
insane to go from 1 in 1500 in the 90s when my brother was diagnosed to 1 in 32 now. Really? That's barely 30 years time span. It's there's something else going on, and I think that the medications, the medicalization of everything is a huge contributing factor.
Hmm. Indeed, because I'm actually putting together a series on deprescribing because I love that.
Mhm.
Um, and there are a couple of quotes in there. One is from Ivan Illich, who wrote Medical Nemesis. And his quote, if I'm remembering correctly, is basically that the biggest threat to our health right now is modern medicine. That was in the 70s. I was in the
Wow.
70s. Things have gotten quite a bit more problematic since the 70s. Um, but it's wow, it's a thing. And so you did mention that I'm the president of the Naturopathic Medicine Institute, which is a fun kind of title to have. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
um, but it's all about vitalism. And
Mhm.
naturopathic doctors for 100 plus years have been the stewards of this vitalistic form of healing. But our schools are not doing the medicine much service. And so the naturopathic medicine was created in order to hold the lamp of vitalism.
Yeah.
And that almost got put out in 2020. And a lot of
Yeah.
people, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of things got put out in 2020. Anyway, we are going to have our very first public outreach as a virtual health fair in the middle of October. By the time this conversation between the two of us is out there with the public, it may have already come and gone, but there will be a 3 hour recording if you've missed the live event. So, public folks, if you like what you're hearing here, I'm going to encourage you to go over to the naturopathicmedicineinstitute.org
Mhm.
and click on Learn. There's a public education page waiting for you right there, and all of the details will be found in that little spot. And I am getting more and more excited because suddenly after a 5 year or 4 year moratorium, actually 5 years because I had already been kicked out of the schools, a moratorium on Fleetwood speaking in a public way. I'm making the circuit again, so I'm having a whole lot of fun. In November, I'm going to be gone every weekend of November
Wow.
because making the circuit, I'll be in Arizona one weekend, and then the next weekend I go to Colorado, and the weekend after that I'll be in Missouri. Um, it's fun. I'll be home for Thanksgiving.
Woo.
So, but
So I want
this,
people to know there's a distinction between, so vitalism might be a new word for folks, though I have
mhm,
used it on this podcast before. So there's the materialistic way and there's the vitalistic way. And there's a time and a place. You get in a car accident, your arm is like twisted and broken into a million pieces. Great. I'm so glad we have the materialistic and we have surgeons and we have morphine and we have all these great anesthetics. We need those in those times, okay? That's where modern medicine shines. Where modern
shines.
medicine does not shine is when you have a complex set of chronic illnesses and they just keep throwing med at you every time you go in for a new visit. Oh, we're just going to increase. Oh, we're just going to add this other one. That was a story that happened to me. I was on 10 meds by the time I was 17 and three over the counter. And guess what? I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse and worse and worse. So the way vitalists view the world, and this does come into a belief system in the way that Dr. Jim Sensenig, who was the founder of the Naturopathic Medicine Institute, talked about vitalism is it's a paradigm. Are you a person that looks at the world through the lens of it being round or flat? And remember, back when we thought the earth was round, or excuse me, thought the earth was flat, we threw people in jail. We quartered them publicly. Like it was not a, it was a whole thing to think that the earth was round when it was,
Yep.
when the main paradigm was it's flat. Okay. So vitalists understand that there's something dynamic that's affecting us. That's where Dr. Fleetwood was getting at the 95% of our being, our conscious and subconscious expression of a human condition. We have to take that into consideration. We're not just made up of parts and pieces and physiology and biochemistry. That's breaking us down into a reductionistic, materialistic way. While that's very helpful for understanding the body, then we have to understand that there's something dynamic that's animating us, and it's a little bit more than just it's beyond. I'm having a hard time explaining it, but I explain to my patients, how do you know a plant's alive versus dead? Well, it's brown and crispy, but there's like something vibrant about a living plant too. Like it has like an essence to it almost. And
Yes.
humans and animals, even rocks, have this
Yes.
essence to them. Even water too, you can tell a stagnant pond versus a river and it's moving and it's well oxygenated. So
Yes.
understanding that things are dynamic and they're not static and reductionistic. Like we're more than the sum of our parts, and we're not
Mhm.
just biochemistry either.
One of the things that I love about this is because you're you. And I'm like, I did a good job with that one.
You did. You did a great job, and I'm getting my certification for VNMI, and so a lot of this is like fresh in my mind, and keeping up with understanding because my job, part of informed consent. Let's go back to that because I don't think enough people know what that actually means. Part of informed consent is to explain what we're doing and why I'm using these herbs or why I'm using these remedies or why I'm doing this. And I am of the opinion that I would rather have them ask those questions in the office and say, hey, we're prescribing kava for X, Y, and Z. When you look online, you're going to see that there's like liver damage. And that study that they're quoting has to do with the high dose that they gave rats, which is a dose that you would have a very difficult time getting in, in this small little tincture bottle that I'm providing you in office, right? It's like, I want people to know, go look online, ask the questions. What's really interesting though is something that the consumers might have a hard time finding is the fact that atorvastatin has a class action lawsuit or Tylenol has a class action lawsuit, right?
I can tell them where to go. Go to drugs.com/pro, PRO. That stands for the professional monograph or information, which is the very same information that manufacturer gave to our Food and Drug Administration to get the drug passed.
Mm.
So you don't have to be a professional to go look at the professional information. Or you can always just ask your favorite browser, hey, is there a class action suit against atorvastatin for causing type 2 diabetes? and you'll see it.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about teaching iatrogenesis, providing that informed consent, is it seems like all of the attorneys, it seems like 90% of all lawyers are going after big pharma because that's where the
Wow.
money is.
Of
There's
course.
pretty much any drug you think of, there is somebody suing the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Even, and the FDA is not in the habit of going after the drug manufacturers, but they have with several of them for such egregious marketing after the drug had gone to market.
Right.
So, and how medical doctors get their updated information on the drugs that they prescribe. It's not because they're studying the literature, they're listening
All
to
the
the
time.
very attractive sales reps that are taking them on cruises and buying them dinner.
Which is now illegal due to the Purdue Pharma scandal and all the oxycodone. I just found out actually the patent for that medication for oxycodone, Oxycontin was the trade name,
Mhm.
actually came from Nazi Germany, which is very surprising to me. And that was apparently Hitler's favorite drug was Oxycontin,
So if we
oxycodone.
think about some of our bigger names in pharmaceuticals, first let me go back. Let me go back because I was gonna start with Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
but let's go further back. The Greek word pharmakeia, from whence we get pharmacy and pharmacology and all things pharmaceutical, meant drug-induced sorcery, witchcraft.
Oh. Oh.
So, in any other part of the world, we would think of that as spirit medicine. Now I
Mm.
say spirit medicine in this country, and people think of ayahuasca, right? Native Americans and
Right.
right.
Right. Right.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, but what's that doing? It's putting it's putting the receiver into an altered state. Well, that's what pharmacy means.
Right.
So I can't help but think that, okay, so that's Greek, that's ancient Greek moving forward. Now we get to when petrochemical pharmaceuticals had their inception, which was the 1940s. We had morphine after the First World War and penicillin, but that was pretty much it. In the 1940s, there was an explosion of drug
Mm.
options. Hmm, what was going on in 1940? And where did the drugs come
Mm.
from? They mostly came out of Europe. Let's get a little bit more specific. They came out of Germany, and their primary names were Bayer, Bayer, like
Yep.
Bayer aspirin,
Yep.
and Pfizer, Pfizer.
And
Hmm,
Merck too is out of Germany, right?
yep, or France. No, I think Germany.
I think Germany.
But these companies were not pharmaceutical companies to begin with. They were chemical companies. What were they doing in the 40s? During World War II, they were killing people with their chemicals. And after that, no shame, they didn't bother to change their name. They just changed their focus.
Yeah.
And that's what we're using. That's what people are taking. That's what people are having shot inside themselves without
But
question.
but they're saving lives. That's the message that we've all been conditioned with is they're
And
saving
yet,
lives, they're changing
I
lives, we're elongating people's lives, we're reducing suffering. And
and it was better
it's
living through chemistry. I remember DuPont's commercials.
yeah.
I'm old enough. I remember those commercials with the dancing couples looking so very happy and the doctors smoking their cigarettes and saying which brands of cigarettes they liked the best after a tough
Yeah.
day at work. But now we can look back and we can see that our kids, my children, are not expected to live as long or as healthfully as me. I'm at the end of the baby boomer generation.
Yeah.
Our Adolescents right now are suffering from the very disease states that was relegated to 55-year-old white, wealthy, sedentary men.
Yeah.
In other words, we're medicating our 11-year-olds for type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol.
Yep.
Our younger kids are now on anti-psychotics for their rage issues. Seriously, a 7-year-old that I took care of was on aripiprazole, an
Jesus.
antipsychotic. And as soon as she walked into my office, she went for the pencil case that had the letter opener. And her baby brother was in the buggy. And mom was freaking out.
Yeah.
What is going on? Better living through chemistry? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And it's tough because and my background with antipsychotics. I think antipsychotics, let's see, psychotropic medications in my opinion are the most dangerous medications that we use on a regular basis. What is it? 1 in 4 adults are on antidepressants, SSRIs. Oh, and we'll just call them anti-anxieties. I've had patients argue with me and I'm like, "No. It's the same thing. They're just using a different off-label use for your anxiety."
Actually, it's no longer off use. Here's the thing.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
now you pushed a button there, Shayna. I'm gonna get all uppity. I'm
Get
gonna get
on
all
it. People like it
uppity.
when you get too many people are on any freaking depressions, dude.
And here's the thing. Since the 80s, when Prozac came on the market, we've been fed a lie, people. It is a lie that there's a serotonin deficiency that's causing your depression. Or, oh, maybe it's norepinephrine. Or maybe it's gabapentin. Or, wait a minute, not gabapentin, but GABA. Maybe
GABA.
it's dopamine. So we've got different drugs on the market that are SSRIs for the serotonin deficiency, SNRIs for the norepinephrine deficiency, NDRIs for norepinephrine and dopamine, one up ya, deficiencies. And 2 years ago, or maybe this is 2024, 2023, it might have been 22 or 23, finally, they came clean. The evidence shows, the research proves that there is no connection between low any kind of neurotransmitters and depression. There's not a cause and effect. There might be that when you're depressed, your serotonin goes down, but that can't be proven either. I say we, I mean they, when the
Medicine,
researchers
medical
looked,
system, yeah.
when they looked at serotonin levels, they're all over the place. You have a bell-shaped
Mhm.
curve, those serotonin levels are all over the place. They're inside the curve, they're outside the curve, they're up, they're down. Same thing with norepinephrine, same thing with dopamine, same thing with GABA. It was a lie. And it took 40 years for their science to catch up. But when you go to drugs.com/pro, you can
Mhm.
look up the pharmacology and you'll see what the mechanism of action is if it is even known. They literally use words like, we think it does this, we presume it does that, we
Yeah.
believe it could impact. Many drugs that are on the market have no known mechanism of action. And then we
That's
dump a bunch of
scary.
chemicals in. Remember I said put a pin in the asthma because I got to come
Yep.
back to the inhaler?
Inhalers. Yep.
When the inhalers were available initially, they contained chlorofluorocarbons as the propellant. Then it
Right.
became understood that, hey, you know what? These chlorofluorocarbons are damaging the ozone layer.
What are they
We're
doing to our
blowing
lungs?
holes in the ozone layer. So we got to take
Ay,
out the CFCs. Let's replace those with fluoro, FLAs, fluoro, no, hydrofluoroalkanes.
HFA. I always wondered what that was on my inhaler.
Hydrofluoroalkanes. So this is a fluoridated alkane that's now being huffed into people's lungs. One of the warnings is that anything inhaled can damage the lungs, can exacerbate bronchospasms, anything that you huff in.
Wow.
And I realize I'm jumping topics. Now let's go back to the antidepressants. I had to calm down just a little bit with the asthma thing before I can talk about flippin' depression. The antidepressants historically were only ever given in a hospital setting because they're
Which
only
is
ever to
appropriate.
major depressive disorder. Yes, it is appropriate. When you come home and you find your beloved unable to move because they are that grieved, and then we
Yeah.
could talk about where has spirit and soul gone? Who teaches anything about spirit in this culture? Who teaches the language of emotions? Who has
Right.
ever been taught a healthy way of expressing emotions in this culture? We don't
Yeah.
have it. So we don't offer it to others because we don't know it. So
Right.
when someone is down, we try to distract them. Oh, honey, you don't cry, baby, don't cry. Let's go shopping. Here's some chocolate. You want some ice cream? Why not
Numb.
say, looks like you're suffering. May I sit here with you?
Yeah. We don't like to be uncomfortable though, and it's easier to give someone ice cream or take them shopping to
Yeah.
cover it up because of our own discomfort. And
But
that's
that's the body's wisdom. That's the body's
it
wisdom
is.
talking. And so the
Yeah.
antidepressants that were only ever given in a hospitalized setting, so that there were 24/7 eyes on that person to keep them from committing suicide. Why? Because the drugs worsen depression. Hear me. Antidepressants worsen depression and can cause anxiety. But these same drug manufacturers who have lied to us for 40 years have been the very ones to create the questionnaire that doctors are to administer to their patients to determine if maybe these physical manifestations, these physical symptoms that they are experiencing, are really rooted in the psyche.
That's the PHQ-9.
That's the PHQ-2 and the PHQ-9, both brought to you by either Eli Lilly or Pfizer, who have a vested interest in prescribers writing prescriptions for their antidepressants.
Wow.
Now,
It's by
they've gone
Pfizer.
too far.
That is,
Yep.
I did not know that. That is one of the standards that I learned in the at the Bastyr Clinic is like we want to give the PHQ-9 and what's the anxiety one? The anxiety questionnaire. And I did not
They
realize made by drug
so
companies talk about a conflict of
it's conflict of interest.
conflict
This
of
is
interest.
such
Thank you.
it is such a broken, incestuous, messed up tangle of wrongness. It's so unethical that it needs to
So
be
unethical.
knocked to the ground. It needs to be knocked to the ground. I mean, when our elected officials are going to the pharmaceutical lobbyists to determine if parents have rights over their own children, that's a problem. And
Yeah, it's
nothing's
a
being
major
done about it.
problem. So what I'm hearing, so for example, I was on Provent, which was a butyrol, and I remember them doing the whole like, oh, the thing that they're using causes holes in the ozone. We need to switch over to the HFA, which I didn't know. I was like 8 years old or something. I was a kid, but I noticed that change. But my asthma was terrible. Like I had really bad asthma. And what I'm hearing is diabetic medication makes symptoms of diabetes worse. What I'm hearing is asthma medications make symptom of asthma worse. Antidepressants, which are supposed to make you feel like you have sun shining out of your butthole, make you feel more anxious, more depressed, and have a higher risk of suicidality. Weird.
Yes,
Seems like they're
that's
trying to
the
keep
box
you a
warning.
patient.
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
And those pharmaceutical companies that have been lying to us all this time have finagled the FDA to approve the use of antidepressants as the first line of therapy for anxiety when they cause anxiety.
Wow.
These are the same drug manufacturers who knowingly left glass shards in childhood vaccines.
Wow.
These are the same manufacturers who have paid to the FDA millions of dollars because the FDA finally said, put your research where your marketing mouth is, because you're saying that your gabapentin drug is good for everything under the sun. but we only approved it as adjunct therapy for seizures. So it's not even a good drug for its primary indication. Put your money where your mouth is, Eli Lilly. No, Park Davis. And they couldn't.
Huh.
But the damage had already been done. And doctors are still writing for gabapentin.
It's a very common medication I see in my practice, definitely. So this glass shards and vaccines, was this before or after the 1986 vaccine exemption where there's no such thing as liability anymore for vaccines?
That's a great question. And I don't know specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. That's okay.
Probably because they would not have had any liability. Our government assumed the liability for the manufacturers because they were being sued so frequently that
Yeah.
we were down to two manufacturers in the world. And only one of those was making a particular vaccine. So I'd have to go
Mm.
back to the stuff that I was doing. I, I wrote the series on excipients and childhood vaccines in 2020
Wow.
when I was a well person being quarantined in my own home, locked down when I had done no wrong.
Yeah.
So it colored how I saw that information, I am sure. And yet
Mhm.
we had been set up for what happened in 2020. And if you want to call me a conspiracy theorist, just know that the difference between a conspiracy theorist and a conspiracy realist is a matter of time. 6 months,
At this At this
years.
point, yeah, that's a good meme that's gone around and it's not. So something I always like to educate people on too is conspiracy is a legal term. So we get called tinfoil hat wearers and conspiracy theorists. Look up the legal definition of a conspiracy. It's when multiple people collude together to make it look like something is going on. There is, Dr. Fleetwood mentioned that, like, hey, a lot of lawyers are going after pharmaceutical companies because there's buku bucks there. In my opinion, there ain't enough money there. The way Purdue Pharma and the Oxycontin scandal happened, they got a slap on the damn wrist compared to the
Yep,
billions of dollars that they made knowingly causing death and damage to. I mean, I have friends that overdosed when I was in middle school on a
yep,
prescription medication they were prescribed from their doctor. I lived in
yep.
East Tennessee at the time when that had happened. So, like, it touched me in a very personal way. And I will never forget seeing classmates of mine, seventh and eighth graders, high as a kite on, equivalent to heroin. It's a little better
Yep.
quality than heroin, let's be honest here. You know what I mean? It's like
Yep.
slap on the wrist. Oh, did you see the new article that just came out on amphetamines and the risk of psychosis and mania? Really? You needed a study for that. Huh.
It's a boxed
Crazy.
warning. It's in the medical literature. Like medical doctors, wake up and read your own literature.
They don't
Get
even follow
the
their own
paper.
rules. It's so frustrating. It's like
Oh,
literally everyone and their mother is on Adderall nowadays, and they're going after women a lot harder with the amphetamines. And again, another amphetamines made popular during Nazi Germany time so that the Nazi soldiers could have a one up against the other team, even though they had a smaller military than, say, the French military. Like the word you used was accurate, the incestuousness of all of this. And the more that I learn about the history, it was actually being in naturopathic medical school that taught me that it's important to understand history. I thought history was just baloney and boring and, like, who cares? But then actually understanding, oh no, we need to understand history so that we can keep people accountable and so we don't keep making the same damn mistakes. And unfortunately, we're not keeping people accountable. Companies aren't being kept accountable, and we're making some really drastic mistakes. Look at the health of my sickest kids are under 10, or my sickest patients are under 10 years old. And they were born that way, basically.
yeah.
And that's shitty and scary, and it is unnerving to see, like, a 2-year-old kid, the most sick person I've ever seen in my practice. And this is, again, not a 60-year-old man that's lived 60 years of his life to get to that point. This is a kid that was born aggravated outside of right in the womb. And it's troubling and disturbing and heartbreaking that our next generation, my generation, won't live as long as my parents' generation. And I'm assuming that the next generation won't live as long either, which is
And and since 2020, those numbers have dropped even more. So say 10 years ago, the average lifespan for an American was like 86. And then it dropped down to 79. It was like, whoa, that was pretty fast. I don't remember what the time frame was. And now it's 76 or 74 since 2020.
Wow.
17 million people have died since the shots for COVID were rolled out. Not from COVID, but from the thing associated with COVID. I can't call it a prevention. I can't call it a reduction. I can't call it anything except something that had COVID in mind.
Right. Yeah. It was marketed in a very sleek way to make it seem like it was the right thing to do. See, this is, we have to understand as a population marketing. And when I'm a business owner, I have to market my business. I also like
Mhm.
sleeping at night, so I'm not going to be dishonest in the way I market. Not everybody is the right fit for my practice. You know what? If you would rather take your metformin and your semaglutide and your whatever other medications, and you want to eat your hamburgers and you don't want to ever exercise, not the right fit for
Right.
my practice. You can go
Go to
see
a
someone
medical
else.
doctor.
Like, go see a medical doctor. They're literally going to be the best fit for you. Your a good medical doctor will explain to you the lifestyle interventions are appropriate and necessary. Unfortunately, a lot of the MDs just don't have the time, or they'll lose their 5-star rating with the CMS, the Center for Medical and Medicaid and Medicare Society. They lose their rating if their patients go off medications. Patients that want to come see Dr. Fleetwood and I, they are seeing outside of the system. And, Dr. Zev had said this. He's another mentor of ours, an old time naturopathic doctor. He's been in practice for over 40 years now. He
45.
said that, oh my God, that's so
No.
crazy. He said that when COVID happened, his practice actually skyrocketed
Yes.
because people were looking
So they
for someone that wanted to help them get well and stay well, not just
right.
put a band-aid on it and stay in your house and drink your booze and smoke your weed. You don't
Yeah,
need to
because those were
exercise.
the only stores we were allowed to go to.
Right, exactly. Which is, yeah, yeah, COVID. Because we were both in Seattle at the times of quarantine, and what an
Yep.
interesting time. We'll definitely say that. So we're winding down towards the end. We got maybe about 7 minutes or so left.
Okay.
Um, Final thoughts from you, Dr. Fleetwood.
Final thoughts for the public: decide where you want to be. Decide what you believe. I've got a thing in my office that says, doubt your doubts and believe your beliefs. Doubt
Ooh.
your doubts and believe your beliefs. It's a line from a Switchfoot song. They are my favorite band. But get real about owning who you are. That's what boundaries are about, is owning your thoughts, owning your emotions, owning your actions, your words.
Mm,
When you can get clear about who you are, then you can get clear about what you believe, and then you can decide to be congruent, meaning what you say is important to you is how you live out your life. So if you
mm,
say health is really important to me, then you're going to prioritize that and you're going to do what is necessary to be done to get you healthy
yep.
spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. If that's you, then you're probably looking for a vitalist like me, like Shayna, like Jared
Mm-hmm.
Zeff. If you say health is important, and then as you're talking to me, for example, this happened yesterday. Oh, health is really important. Hang on just a second. I'm picking up some food. Yep. I'd like,
Right.
I'm like, okay, glad you're back, dude. I'm not even going to ask where you're picking up food. So if you say one thing and you're living a very different way, that is incongruent behavior. And that's a brilliant place for dis-ease to take place. Now,
Mm,
dis-ease, disease, is very different from discomfort. Shayna, you made a point earlier that we like to be comfortable and we don't like to see other people uncomfortable. So we're trying to get comfortable all the time. The only thing that's comfortable is that which is dying. Anything that is growing is stretching itself. So, quick
Yeah.
story about acorns. Acorns are having a party and they're buffing up their shells and they're dusting off their cute little caps and they're getting ready for the party. And in comes this dirty, cracked, nasty looking acorn that's going, y'all, look up. And everybody's like, ew, what is wrong with your cap? It's not even on straight. What is wrong with your shell? You're all cracked and you're dirty. You're like oozing out of your own shell. And the dirty acorn is going, I know. Listen to me. Just just look up. Look up. And they look up and they're like, yeah, so? And the dirty, disheveled acorn is going, it's an oak tree. That's what we're supposed to be.
Right.
And you got to break and you got to get dirty. You got to be uncomfortable if you want to grow into who you were meant to be.
Yeah. Yep. That is very true. That's the definition of authenticity is you being comfortable with yourself. I've had a
Yep.
lot of challenges personally lately where I'm learning that I deserve space in relationships, including friendships, and
Mhm.
a lot of my friends don't have the space that I would have for them. It's like if I
Right.
share my opinion that differs from them, they're not having they're not having that space. They're like upset that I had a different opinion than them. While it was respectful. Hey, I respect your choice. I'm not going to do that. That's not what I want to do. Like I'm glad that that works for you. And for some reason that's unacceptable to folks. And I would rather have people that are okay. This is my quote that I've lived by. It's a Dr. Seuss quote. Be who you are and say what you feel because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. And like
Yeah.
that is such a true thing. Like I can flub up and I call it foot and mouth syndrome. Foot and mouth syndrome. I'd rather be myself and say the wrong thing and like get a little red in the face and have to apologize and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I misspoke. I said the wrong thing. I'm so sorry that it landed the way it did. That was not my intention. Please forgive me. What can I do to, help improve the quality of our relationship or whatever needs to be done? Right. But I'd rather be that person that flubs up than pretend to be the buffed up fancy acorn that doesn't even realize. So
Right.
I'll take that.
Comfort and convenience is killing Americans.
There's a book actually called The Comfort Crisis that I read last summer or a couple summers ago, and it's a really good book. And it talks about this like we are so damn comfortable. We live in air conditioning and heat. We like never have fluctuations. And this guy, his goal is like I think once a year you want to have like an outrageous goal that you have. My outrageous goal, I don't know if it's going to happen, but is to climb the Grand Teton next year. I don't
Oh,
have a lot of climbing experience, but if I like push myself, propel myself in that direction of like a ridiculous goal, I will get there. And like, okay, I'm having a baby in between now and then, but I need a goal to like get my body back in good shape. So
that having a
in
baby
this,
thing is a pretty significant goal right there. It's all good.
yes, in this episode, we talked about iatrogenicity, which is the proper and correct use of medications and procedures that still cause harm. We talked about a couple different medications, torvastatin, proton pump inhibitors. We talked about inhalers. We talked about antidepressants, Prozac being the most, the first one that was prescribed on the market. We talked about working equals symptoms stopping, which means you are suppressing your symptoms so your body can't tell you what's going on. So it's going to scream louder next time.
Yes.
We talked about how the various classes of medications that we discussed cause symptoms that make it look like your type 2 diabetes, your asthma, your depression actually get worse. Huh,
Yep.
weird. Um, by the way, black box warnings are no longer called that. They're called boxed
Box.
warnings.
Yeah.
And that
Box.
drugs.com/PRO is free. And you can look and see any of the medications you're taking, the medications your children are taking, your parents are taking. I go through these drug monographs with my patients in all if it's
Yeah.
appropriate. I think it is because that's proper informed consent when you understand the side effects and potential consequences of taking these medications. We talked about the definition, the original root word of pharmaco. Say it, the
Pharmakeia.
Greek word,
Pharmakeia.
pharm, drug induced sorcery. Interesting. And
And
so some of the questionnaires were actually created by the pharmaceutical industry and become an industry standard that even in naturopathic medical school, I learned how to use the PHQ-9 and what is that? I can't remember the anxiety one, but brought to you by your dear friends Pfizer.
yep. And they've written the protocols, which are incongruent with their own drug monographs. And just a correction, Prozac was not the first antidepressant on the market. It was the first antidepressant claiming neurotransmitter
Aha.
interference. And ever since then, even the older drugs changed their drug class to one up the whole neurotransmitter thing.
Yeah.
No proof,
Yeah,
just
that
myth.
was definitely going on when I was taking all those antipsychotic medications. Is the boxed warning got put on Paxil for under the age of 18, which wasn't there when I started taking it at the ripe age of 13. Let's see, the SNRIs, the serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, that was a new class of drug that came out while I was on all these fun medications. Like this stuff is not old, people, and we think that it like modern medicine is traditional medicine. No, we need to be using words appropriately and we need to understand them. If you use a word, look it up, define it. Is that the
Yeah,
definition that you know it to be, or was that the marketing word that you got convinced and conditioned into believing?
good point.
Okay. All right. So I am forgetting right at this current moment who my next guest is, but we have some really good guests coming up this month. So thank you for your time. And if you liked this video or found it interesting or controversial, send it to someone. Share it with someone that you can have a respectful conversation around and say, "Hey, like I didn't know this," and "Hey, my son is on this medication. Like, what the heck? Like, can we have a talk? Can we have a conversation about this?" And um, like and subscribe. That's the way you can support my channel without a financial contribution, and I would greatly appreciate it. Dr. Fleetwood, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
They can find me at monarchnaturalmedicine.com. They can also find me on Spotify. I've got a podcast called The Disease Reversal Project. I think it's a podcast in
Ooh,
that it's really just a monologue of me talking you through the steps that are required to reverse a chronic disease. There
cool.
are two pages, so if you feel like you're kind of in the middle of the disease reversalproject.com, there is page two. So click on page two. That's how to
Okay.
find me.
Very good. Well, I look forward to future collaborations, and I will make sure to grab that online health fair as well and stick that in the show notes for people to be able to find at the naturopathic medicine institute.com. And thank you so much for your time. You guys have a good rest of your day.